right, once again, God is good. 1 Kings 9 this time. Let's call this one Heard, because this is piggybacking off of the last chapter in which Solomon, in his prayer of dedication, over and over asked God to hear Israel's prayers anytime they genuinely turned and repented. Not just Israel, though. Foreign nations that would look to Israel as an example. He interceded or asked God to hear their prayers as well, understanding that Israel at its best could be an example for all people as to how we could establish not only a healthy relationship with God, but the ways in which he was willing to help everybody not only find success, but have it with longevity and stability. But in this chapter, God is going to say, I heard you. And in saying that, it's not necessarily going to come as quickly as we might think, even though it's the next chapter. We're going to see that it came after Solomon finished building all that he wanted to build. And about halfway through the chapter, we're going to see that that was about 20 years into his building projects, or roughly 20 years into his reign. And so there are times when we are working possibly in obscurity, having offered up a prayer, wanting the answer, not necessarily getting it clearly, but as Solomon has done here, as long as we can stay diligent, doing the right thing. Sometimes God just wants to see how we will progress without getting an instant reward for the things that we're doing. And so in this chapter, after God says 20 years it took for Solomon to build all the things that he needed to build. And after that 20 years, God gave him his answer. The chapter goes on to talk about the way he split up the forced servitude, meaning the Canaanites who weren't removed from the land in the way that the Israelites were supposed to, were in this chapter actually subjected to forced labor, helping us to understand where the forced labor in Israel came from. And then beyond that, helping to understand a little bit more detail about his officials, the fact that he didn't just build the temple, but he went there to sacrifice 3 times a year, how his wife moved from the city of David to the hall that he had built. Beyond that, we'll start to see the beginnings of the fleet of ships that Solomon built. But all of that success, once again, was predicated on God helping him. And God said, I'm going to help you as long as we mentioned before, you use your platform for the right reasons. And so after 20 years of diligence, Solomon gets an answer from God that his prayer was heard. And in letting Solomon know that his prayer was heard, he's going to emphasize not only some of the things that Solomon emphasized in his prayer, but one of the things that he warned him about in the midst of building the temple is that if you follow in the footsteps of your father David, the healthy footsteps, understanding he wasn't a perfect man, but most notably, walking in the way that he did in being complete. It's going to say, of course, doing all that God commanded him to do. But the commands, like we said, can sometimes seem burdensome when we just look at them as rules, as opposed to counsel as to how you can govern and lead and live effectively without all the baggage that can come with the guilt and shame that often goes hand in hand with trying to cut corners to being successful. And so it says, insofar as you do it the way your father David did, being complete. I heard a fighter say this week, John Jones, that he's getting ready to fight Cyril Gahn. Said he's a one-dimensional fighter. And so if we look at laws from that perspective, not so much as being a bunch of rules, but the kind of counsel that God is giving us so that we can be complete people, that we don't have to worry about that kind of criticism coming at us, because if, like Solomon, we are proving to be complete, then the criticism is irrelevant. And so in this chapter, God is saying, insofar as you prove to be complete, meaning doing all the things I've counseled you to do as a wise man, then understand you will not have, as we mentioned before, Lot issues, understanding that Lot was able to take all his wealth into a seemingly prosperous land. He had Lot issues when all that he had was swept away in God's judgment over the shady ways that things were being done in Sodom and Gomorrah, the place where he set up camp after splitting with Abraham. And so insofar as we are God's people, understand that likewise to this day, something we've heard since the time we were kids, let your light so shine before men that they will give glory to your Father in heaven. So whether it's this portion of Solomon's story or moving forward to the new covenant where it's talking about the ways in which we can let our light shine, understand that in our times, he simply may be giving us counsel as to how we can properly use our platform to avoid having lot issues, meaning getting a whole lot, but doing it in a way that simply lacks genuine peace and stability.